Welcome to the table, friends. I'm your humble host, GreyDMs, and with me as always is Owen.
Hello.
Today, we sit down with you at the table to discuss a game that is the natural progression of our exploration of the world of darkness.
Okay.
A game that we are exploring ourselves, partly for the first time. And
more you than me.
Yep, it is a game that also might be the game you should be playing.
Oh, okay. That's strong. Some strong words there.
So we're going to be exploring the 5th edition of Wherewolf the Apocolypse and discussing why maybe everybody on this planet should be playing this game right now.
Okay.
Now, before we do that, I feel the need after some diving into this game to kind of have a disclaimer.
Okay.
We here at the table with you really do hope that everybody who spends the time listening to two jackoffs online like us is having a good time, or is at least trying to be healthy in this world as much as you can be. And you're doing the things that you need to do to stay sane, happy, focused, growing, not or laying down in the pit of despair that seems so prevalent some of these days.
Feeling really seen, right? You know.
But in the discussion of this game, we will be talking about a lot of topics that may bring up some of those feelings. Werewolf the Apocolypse is a game about what happens after you have lost the fight to save the world. So this can get a little bit dark and angry. And if you're just not in the headspace to do that right now, just switch this episode off and go listen to something else. We thank you for trying.
We've got other podcasts, so you can go listen to those.
Yeah, sure. However, if you're ready to go on a little deep dive with us, I do want to let you know that as much as me and Owen try to keep some of our political beliefs separate, and we want to be objective in kind of reviewing these things, this is a game that talks about politics a lot. And so some stuff is just going to come out, and it's going to it is my interpretation of the game. So, hopefully you understand that this is all in service of explaining why this game is cool and fun and why you should play it, and not supposed to be preachy, but it's going to feel preachy.
All right.
So, without further ado, I'd like to start by asking Owen, what do you know about this game? What is your impression right now before we talk about it, about what the game is, what it's about?
So the only real version I am familiar with was Werewolf the Forsaken. And that was taking place side by side with Vampire at the time. And from what I remember, it was two different, you had the Forsaken, and then you had, I can't remember what the other
Pure Tribes.
The Pure Tribes. And the Pure Tribes were considered the bad guys.
Yeah, I think Max will be screeching at us.
Yeah.
But I think the Pure Tribes were the ones who, turned on Gaia. And
was a Father Wolf.
Father Wolf, yeah. And it is a different history than this game, just to be clear.
But yeah, the whole purpose was werewolves were kind of there to keep the balance between the shadow world and nature and the real world for the most part.
Yeah, then it was heavily focused on the hunt.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool. So that's a pretty good understanding of the game. I guess we can wrap up the whole thing right there.
Right? All right, sweet. Well, it's been fun. I hope you guys had fun listening. We out.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. First, let's talk about the game itself when it was created. So 1992 was basically the first edition release of Werewolf the Apocolypse. If you go back to previous episodes, you know that Mark Rain Hagen at the time created Vampire the Masquerade. He was basically, their studio published 8 different expansions or 8 different publications that first year.
Yep.
Then he came up on this idea that they were going to release 5 new games in 5 years.
Okay, 1 a year.
Yeah,
sure.
I guess growth, just
exponential.
Yeah, growth basically abhors stagnation, so they just wanted to keep driving it. That was probably a little bit too much, but that probably didn't show up exactly in the first game, which was Werewolf the Apocolypse. So whereas Vampire focused on the city and the kind of corrupt monsters living therein, Werewolf the Apocolypse was very much a game about, eco warfare and terrorism against, basically the urban against the rural, and kind of a lot of different themes therein. People suspect that basically, and Mark has talked about a lot of his feelings about global warming and the state of the world kind of influenced.
Yeah, he said he has very strong opinions. He's not afraid to let them out.
Does. Also, another source of inspiration was the movie, or possibly the book, The Wolfen.
Okay.
The Wolfen is basically a story of two police detectives in New York City who are involved in the investigations of suspicious deaths across the city, which are revealed to be the work of a race of intelligent beings descended from canids called the Wolfen. The novel is told from the point of view of the human characters, as well as the Wolfen themselves. So basically, that was also a movie that was released in 1978, and then they later on made a movie about it. And it's kind of modern werewolf movie.
Yeah.
So Wherewolf the Apocolypse was created and it was released. It was pretty successful. It was the second kind of storytelling game in the original World of Darkness. Basically, Werewolf the Apocalypse was in the 90s, was an eco fable. It was a sort of ultra-violent Captain Planet for grown-ups. Werewolves served the defenders of nature, wilderness, and the wild, acting as Mother Nature's shock troops in a war on pollution, urbanization, and environmental degradation. So here's a little line from the modern game, but I think this is apt. The world crumbles in an ongoing environmental apocalypse because powerful decision makers have opened themselves up to spiritual corruption through attitudes of short-term greed.
That doesn't sound familiar at all.
No. So in 1994, a second edition of the game was released. It expanded on the original rules and lore, adding more depth to the game's settings and mechanics. In 2000, kind of along with Vampire, a revised edition was released, basically streamlining the game's many mechanics and updating the lore to reflect the evolving World of Darkness universe. So in 2005, Wherewolf the Forsaken was released. So this was basically where they went back and they did the reboot. So the game shifted the focus from the Garou struggle against the Wyrm to a more personal, immediate conflict with the Garou for fighting to reclaim their lost spiritual power. It's kind of why the betrayal and stuff of ancient times stripped them of what they once were. 2011, the classic World of Darkness line was basically when Onyx Path Publishing picked up the whole series. So they reprinted the original and all the supplements. And then 2013, the 20th anniversary edition came out. Okay, so 5th edition released in 2023. And here's where we need to kind of talk about some things. 5th edition was not universally met with acclaim.
I mean, this seems to be a theme.
Yeah. So a lot of people who are fans of the old game, and remember, this is a game that had 20 years of lore behind it.
Right.
They had a struggle with 5th edition's streamlining of the materials. So 5th edition brought many updates that needed to be done. They brought many updates that basically updated the previous content of the game to be more socially and cultural ambiguous.
All right.
This is a point of contention across many different groups. Basically, I've heard it explained the best that in our modern day kind of environment, if you reference a cultural group and you do it well, they will complain that you're stealing, they're whitewashing it, or you're stealing
cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation. If you do it bad, then you're just giving into the stereotypes. So there's basically a lot of these consultant groups that people go to and they put their material in front are just don't do it.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, Werewolf had a lot of different tribes and pieces that were attached to real world cultural groups. A lot of Native American stuff, some Greek, some Norse mythology, and a lot of that had to be kind of carved out to just put out a product that wasn't problematic or
offensive.
So a lot of people are just upset about that.
Yeah.
I get it. The other thing is that we'll kind of read the statement coming out here. 5th edition was basically kind of like not a soft reboot, but a soft reimagining of basically the story of Werewolf, and kind of like Vampire, we're going to acknowledge that the past happened, but we're going to kind of take a soft refresh at this point in time and change the way we're going. So at the same time, they kind of took all the other lore and built upon it so that it kind of feels like they're maybe not being as truthful in service. There's a lot of muddled stuff. Yeah. The point is, we don't want to be negative about this. It's a good book. From everything I've heard, from everything I've read, the book being chief among those, it is a good property. It sounds very fun to play, and we encourage people to play it. It also has been updated specifically to be in line with kind of very current sensibilities, even though these same issues were echoed when the original came out.
Yeah.
They're now kind of updated a little bit to kind of fit the mood of the world. Hence, that's kind of one of the issues with the book, is that the mood of the world is not super happy right now.
Yeah.
So, in their own words, if you're familiar with previous editions of Werewolf, let us be upfront and state that 5th edition is a reimagining, not a continuation. You can even call it a reboot if you prefer. The truths and lore of previous editions aren't necessarily true in this edition. Take this book and the world it proposes at face value. So, where does Wherewolf the Apocolypse take place? What is the world of darkness, the specific angle on the world of darkness that Wherewolf the Apocolypse kind of plays into? Well, like I said, I think they pretty much say it best here, so
why not use their words?
You knew something was wrong even before your first change. You could taste the poison in the air and the chemicals on the streets and sidewalks. It was an alienating experience. None of your friends cared quite so much. It just didn't bother them the same. Then came the first change and your horror at the realization of what you were, a werewolf, a Garou. After your first change, you put the pieces together. Gaia. Spirits. The world that you inherited imposed upon you a duty to protect it and to destroy the enemies responsible for despoiling her. Your view of the world expanded, grew more nuanced, more certain, as things fell into place one by one. You could turn on the news, and although they didn't speak there about it in Garou terms, the meaning was the same. Endless stories of new ravages, perpetrated by monsters in human form, wearing expensive suits ready with excuses and explanations. But this time you could not be fooled. You smelled the greed surging inside them. You had their scent.
Nice.
So, Wherewolf the Apocolypse basically puts these truths forward in game terms. This is basically the kind of the guiding principles behind the game. Mm-hmm. Werewolves have the ability to take numerous forms on a spectrum from lupine to hominid. Werewolves belong to multiple worlds, spirit and flesh, wolf and human, but are wholly accepted by none. Werewolves are feared and mistrusted by each other, by each of the worlds in which they partially belong. Werewolves are creatures of rage, forever at risk of losing control of themselves. Werewolves are charged with an unreliable greater purpose by Gaia, a spiritual entity who is herself inherently unknowable. Werewolves consider the Wyrm, a primal force of entropy and decay, to be the chief threat to Gaia, and much of Garou existence has been confronting its agents, real or imagined. War, famine, pestilence, death. The world ends not with a bang, but with a sonorous, doleful howl. The world is in its death throes, shuddering in the grip of Capitalocene era. Its oceans acidified, its forest denuded, its climate superheated, its life forms plunging into extinction, all to satiate that which is insatiable, the avarice of human beings. Autocrats rise to power, funding militaries and police forces that thrive as the people they ostensibly exist to protect languish, sicken, and starve. To the people of the world, however, life goes on. People have more entertainment choices than ever before. Their phones and computers receive a steady flow of data, most of which desensitizes the owner of these devices or offers easy escape. Pundits bloviate from televisions on screaming services and angry gatherings. Millionaire actors paid by billionaire patrons to stake everybody's fury at every other to tell people whom to hate, whom to blame for their problems. Sports, music, games, luxury on demand, easy credit, phantom money. Take out a loan to buy a car to drive to work to pay off the car. Hustle on the side, acquire, discard, relax, work harder, invest, enlist, declare. The frog doesn't realize it's slowly boiled to death. Born of the material despair, spiritual rot takes hold, serving as a beacon to cruel spirits and tempting a forlorn world into greater catastrophe. Greed is a virtue. Consumption is liberation. War makes us safe. Cruelty to one's fellows in one environment is the pinnacle of achievement. Normal, as a human concept, has yielded to an unending series of crises, from the economic to the humanitarian to the ecological to the existential. By any sane definition, the apocalypse is upon us. The forces of entropy have won. The residents of the world dwell in what shall soon become a corpse, borrowing from the banks to take one more joyride before the sea swallows the coast and the filthy air becomes too hot to breathe.
Okay, but when are we getting to the part about werewolf?
Right? Like, it's like, yeah, this is just a commentary.
Yeah,
What's going on outside?
I really don't see the fiction here.
So there's some concepts that we have to go over before we can like kind of further dive into the game.
Sure.
So in the world of Werewolf the Apocolypse, there is known as the Triad. This is the cosmology of Werewolf the Apocolypse, centers around three primal forces known as the Wyld, the Weaver, and the Wyrm. So the Wyld represents chaos, creativity, and the force of raw creation. The Weaver embodies order, structure, and the forces that shape the Wyld's creations into stability and form. And the Wyrm, originally a force of balance, has become a force of corruption and destruction, embodying decay and entropy. So basically, the three forces, ideally, are basically performing part of the circle, each performing part of like a cycle.
Yeah.
So the creation, basically raw, chaotic. The Weaver, basically kind of very analogous to, well, like a weaver, but also like very connected to like spiders and stuff like that. Basically weaves the raw chaos of creation into more stability, into order, pattern that will exist. And then ultimately the Wyrm comes to kind of like devour, to send everything back to decay, back into entropy, to end. If everything is in balance, the spiritual world flourishes. The Garou, the protagonists of the game, are Garou, or werewolves who serve as warriors of Gaia. They are charged with protecting the natural world from the corrupting influences of the Wyrm. So Garou society is divided into various tribes, each with unique cultures, traditions, and spiritual roles. Some of the, well, anyway, we'll talk about the tribes. We don't need to go into them yet. So the original game was Werewolf the Apocolypse, but all the editions prior to 5th edition posed that the Garou needed to step forward to stop the apocalypse from happening.
And this
5th edition is that the apocalypse has come.
Yeah.
Like,
or is it that it's already happened, or it's happening right
dead.
now? Okay.
Like Gaia is dead, and the tribes are deciding how basically to go out in their glory, to tear everything apart.
Gotcha.
And there's a little wiggle room. Some of the tribes think Gaia could be fixed and reborn, but like it is a very dark take on the battle. Like the apocalypse is already here. It's largely like the fight was lost. So now basically comes for fighting over the corpse of Gaia. Rage and balance. Garou are driven by a primal force called rage, which grants them great power but also threatens to consume them. The Garou must balance their human and werewolf forms while maintaining their rage to avoid losing control and falling into madness and violence. Spirituality and the Umbra. The Garou have a deep spiritual connection to the world and can travel to the Umbra, a spirit world that mirrors the physical world. The Umbra is inhabited by spirits that the Garou can interact with, and it plays a crucial role in the battles against the Wyrm. Spiritual quests and rituals are important aspects of Garou life. Environmentalism. A major theme in the game, obviously, is the protection of the environment. The Garou see themselves as guardians of the natural world, fighters against pollution, deforestation, and other forms of environmental degradation. Tribal diversity. The Garou are divided into various tribes, each with their own unique culture, beliefs, and methods of fighting the Wyrm. The diversity highlights the different ways in which the Garou approach their common goal and emphasizes the importance of unity and cooperation in the face of a shared enemy. And the Litany. The Garou follow a set of laws known as the Litany, which covers their behavior and interactions with their society. The Litany includes rules such as maintaining the veil, respecting the territory of other Garou, and showing respect to those of higher rank. So their Litany is, specifically, combat the Wyrm wherever it dwells and wherever it thrives, respect the territory of another, accept an honorable surrender, submit to those of higher station, respect those of lower station, for all are of Gaia. The first share of the kill is for the greatest in station. Eat not the flesh of humans. The veil shall not be lifted. The leader may be challenged at any time during peace. The leader may not be challenged during wartime. And take no action that causes a cairn to be violated. So, the Garou struggle with their dual nature as both humans and beasts. The themes explored the tension between the human morality and the primal instincts. Garou must navigate the challenges of maintaining their humanity while embracing their wolf side and the consequences of losing control to their inner beast. The Garou have a strong sense of heritage and often look to their ancestors for guidance and strength. Ancestral spirits play a significant role in Garou culture, and the connection to past generations is important for understanding their place in the world and the role in the ongoing battle against the Wyrm. Sure, that's Wherewolf the Apocolypse.
I don't feel quite as angry as you made me think I was going to become, but I mean, I get it. I understand. It's that, truth is stranger than fiction thing going on here, where it's like, you guys just wrote about modern day and then added werewolves.
Yes, it's a little more than that, yeah. So the history of Wherewolf the Apocolypse, basically, like I said, it was always about the Garou being like agents of Gaia fighting this battle.
Right.
And then a lot of the struggles came from, obviously, them fighting, like the nameless forces of the Wyrm,
mm-hmm.
or sometimes like the named forces. They did make this conglomerate company called like Pentax. That's like basically the kind of the big bag that just kind of fills in for, rather than calling everything like BP oil and stuff like that. But clearly that's what it is, And then a lot of the problems that they have, which is, I'll kind of tie into a little bit in my thoughts at the end, were like inner tribe issues.
Yeah.
So when you make a werewolf, you're going to basically pick an auspice and a tribe, and those detail both how your character kind of works and also like what your character believes.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're supposed to kind of pick different tribes to put into a pack. And that's going to cause like a different opinion on how to approach this. The Garou are first and foremost possessors of extreme violence.
Yeah.
So when they're presented with a task like defending the world, defending Carnes, basically trying to like, essentially protect Gaia from this decay into entropy, a lot of them will tend towards violence. Not to be said that an insignificant amount of mortal resources needs to be put into taking a Garou down,
right?
But they can be taken down. So like this kind of this notion of like you've had 20 years of interpolitics, tribal, all this stuff. You used to have something called the Garou Nation, which is basically all the tribes connecting in a loose understanding to at least kind of make sure rules are adhered to.
Mm-hmm.
And 5th edition came up and said, no, the Garou Nation fell. Gaia's dead. Like, you lost. And you lost because the nature of your battle is unwinnable.
Yeah.
Right? So if we go back to the three forces, right? The Wyld, the Weaver, and the Wyrm. The Wyld makes probably the most obvious sense. Nature is a very strong kind of part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It is like a god-like spirit in the Umbra. When the Wyld manifests it or pushes through, things like spontaneous kind of evolution, a couple hooking up, getting, having like a great night of passion and then having octuplets or something happen, like basically birthing. And it by itself, it's not exactly a perfect force, but it is a very important fundamental force of the world. The Weaver is mostly technology and humanity.
Mm.
The Garou
structure.
Yeah. Some of the Garou tribes have opinions that the Weaver is evil, but most of them like understand that the Weaver is kind of an essential part of controlling the Wyld.
Yeah, otherwise you just have this utter chaos happening all the time.
Yeah, if life goes unchecked, you have cancer, right?
Right.
So the Weaver is this kind of mixture of the two. Some of the Garou tribes, basically like the Glasswalkers, kind of tend towards like, no, we need to manage the Weaver. Other of the tribes are like, no, we need to rip the Weaver apart. Like, this has to be weakened too. And then the Wyrm's forces are kind of like the forces of chaos and entropy that kind of are inevitable because of the Weaver.
Right.
The Weaver has stopped that progression, that unchecked growth, and put stability to it. So the only ending to that story is decay and entropy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the Wyrm is also the forces of like greed. Like,
it doesn't care what the ends are, or the means are. Like, the ends justify the means, and it's, opinion.
Exactly. So if unchecked bounty exists and we put our society upon it to put order, agents of the Wyrm go in that and try to take what they want and consolidate it at the detriment of society. That is not a hidden like reference to rich, powerful billionaires screwing over the world. Like, I mean, it's in the like this is the raw kind of part of the and in comparison to vampire, where vampire is essentially a story of people coming to terms with their need to feed on other people. So like they may come from a place where their ideals are of a perfect society where everybody pitches in and everybody does their part and all these grand things. They're coming to terms with like the nature of they're corrupted inside, that no, there's someone who has to take, and they have to like find a way to come to peace with that. Werewolf, on the other side, is basically about the people who find an uncontrollable anger within at the state of those beings.
Right.
That the world, these people that were given the bounty of the world, took too much and killed it. So how could they not rage and are filled with that rage, go in and tear throats and rip people apart? Like I said, it
sounds like a good plan.
Like I said, that's why I think maybe people need to play this. Maybe people need to get this side out. But the other thing I think it does really well is it shows that just because all those people feel that, they feel this need to like fight back and tear and rip, none of them agree on how to do it, so they fail. That's why it's inevitable, because they can't get together to cohesively fight. They're just constantly infighting and tripping each other up. And that's where we go into our description of some of these tribes and why they don't get along. So basically, what is a tribe, right? Like an auspice is pretty simple. We'll go into that a little bit later. But like a tribe is this thing that your character kind of defines your character's philosophies. And it's like when you make your character, it's not unchangeable, but it is hard to change. And it also deals with generally you having a patron spirit. So a tribe emerges from the patronage of a powerful spirit. When a Garou pledges their life to a specific patron's spirit, they become a part of that tribe. So regardless of wherever they are. Given the patronage of that spirit, a tribe bears a certain outlook on the world. It's a worldview as well as an implicit call to action in service of Gaia. Tribe membership confers some degree of cultural and belonging, but all tribes consist of werewolves who are passionate creatures and prone to infighting. Tribes are not lockstep perspectives, but fractious and factional groups based on certain commonalities. So here we get where some of the changes happened, because a lot of these tribes, and there were more, have been kind of reimagined or adjusted and
just relocated into another tribe.
Yeah, and some of them have been stripped out of like their, kind of real world cultural parts.
Their identity.
Yeah. So like the first one we'll talk about, like the black, we're not going to go super deep in these because there are 11 of them, but like just to give you an idea of what's going on. The first one are like the Black Furies. So the Black Furies serve Gaia by opposing injustice and perceived injustice, but they have a reputation for escalating their pursuit of justice into vengeance. Their patron spirit is Gorgon. So basically, they're fierce warriors who fight to protect women and children from the Wyrm's corruption. They often take on the role of protectors, defenders, and they use basically largely combat prowess to battle the forces of evil. They used to have a very Greek, like the Furies and female kind of spin to them, and a lot of that's been kind of pulled back a little bit and reformed a little bit. The Bone Gnars, Jesus.
For a second, I thought you went Australian. The Bone Gnars. Bone
Gnars serve Gaia by hiding in plain sight and digging up dirt, discovering the secrets others leave, discarded amid the detritus.
Spies.
Their patron spirit is Rat. So basically, they're resourceful survivors who thrive in urban environments, often living in the shadows and scavenging to survive. They kind of like are previous editions. There was a point at which they weren't a tribe; they were like an insult. They were like a curse to those that were tribeless. Like you're the bottom rung of society. You gnaw upon the bones of other people's kills.
Yeah.
But in the current edition, they're kind of like they're a tribe, a philosophy of themselves, and they kind of serve an important purpose. Children of Gaia. Children of Gaia solve enigmas, particularly one surrounding Gaia's crises and the mysteries of the Umbra. Their patron spirit is the unicorn. They're basically dedicated to preserving nature and living in harmony with the environment. Often healers, druids, environmentalists. There's some sense of respect that many of the other tribes give them, giving their intent. They're also one of the only tribes that thinks that Gaia can be saved instead of like avenged. So the Gale Stalkers. Gale Stalkers serve Gaia as hunters, trackers, and providers who are known for their hardiness and the relentlessness of their pursuit. Their patron spirit is the North Wind.
Okay.
That was kind of cool. They're wanderers and explorers seeking knowledge and adventure across the world. Often scouts, messengers, seekers of ancient wisdom. Gale Stalkers, another one that lost kind of its cultural identity thing. But basically, they're often like kind of relentless pursuers. That's one of like the big thing kind of about their flavor a little bit. And there's the Ghost Council. Garou, the Ghost Council favor unconventional approaches and challenge taboos to use rivals' weaknesses against them in service to Gaia. Their patron spirit is the Horned Serpent. They're scholars and historians dedicated to preserving knowledge and traditions of the Garou. This one was specifically cleaned up because they're kind of like seekers of forbidden knowledge, and this was heavily tied to Native Americans.
Wow.
And like they went through and they got rid of a lot of that because like the Horned Serpent, like the horned serpent is a big figure in Native American mythology.
Right.
And so they kind of, once again, got rid of that stuff just to make sure it wasn't problematic. Glasswalkers are servants of Gaia that develop technology acumen to court spirits of glass and concrete. Circuits of steel, their patron spirit is the spider. So it's kind of cool. So they're like, basically, they kind of recognize their place and the Weaver's place in order to fight the Wyrm. Versus the ones who are like, oh, the Weaver needs to go too.
Right. I mean, you can kind of see that with their patron being the spider.
Yeah. Heart Wardens serve Gaia by expanding, cultivating, and protecting their territory and that of their pack, offering hospitality to those who ask of them, fiercely settling accounts for any abuse of that hospitality. Their patron spirit is the stag. So they're protectors of wildlife and the natural world, living in harmony with animals and nature. They tend to be territorial, more like they're often in service of protecting a cairn. So, which I brought up multiple times now. So a cairn is like essentially like dragon lines, ley line. It's a source of power.
Right.
Because Garou need to talk to spirits, and because like the Umbra is so vast and ancient that like you may be a fresh Garou and you start talking to like the spirit of duck, like the duck spirit, which we think is like, that's hilarious. But no, the spirit of duck is like a force of nature that can kick the crap out of you. And you may approach him and he may be pissed off because some werewolf 1,000 years ago pissed him off.
Yeah.
And you're like, crap, I got to figure out some.
We don't leave grudges. Like, they are eternal.
Seriously, like that's how this works. In the Umbra, the world like has no time, right?
Right.
So like these things are all like human kind of concepts. So a cairn is generally a place where powerful spirits can occupy like the gauntlet between the Umbra and the real world may be weakened, and they're like holy sites and very, very important resources. So both finding one of these and taking it back from the enemy is like the pinnacle of glory, and losing one is like the pinnacle of shame. So Heart Wardens are often served like basically guarding these places.
Gotcha.
So Red Talons serve Gaia by giving a voice to those who lack words, protecting the unspoiled places, and clawing back what they see as unjust encroachment. Their patron spirit is the Griffin. They're the ones who are just like, nah, we should kill.
Let's just get rid of them. I mean, that would just be the easiest thing.
Did you say kill rate? That was what we were talking about.
I said, till what? Kill what?
Yeah. So not quite berserkers, but like they're very much the ones who are like, we are like, you got to be at the front. Like our claws are the thing that we're supposed to use.
They got to be red.
They're red talons. Yeah. And the Shadow Lords. The Shadow Lords' outlook is that might makes right, and the role of the weak is submission. But that might can take many forms. The patron saint is thunder. So they're manipulators, strategists, using their skills in deception and subterfuge to achieve their goals. They often act as spies, assassins, and political manipulators. Keep in mind here that we're talking about like, oh, they're spies and assassins, but they're still freaking werewolves.
It's like that whole thing is like, so what's your specialty? Well, sneaking, backstabbing, and clawing people apart. Okay, cool. What's your specialty? Oh, espionage, computers, tearing people apart.
Tearing people apart. Biting their bodies.
What are your specialties? Well, gardening, I do some carpentry, and tearing people apart.
So they're the silent striders who are forever on the move, master travelers, death with many customs, as well as their gathering and sharing of information. Their patron saint is the owl. They're masters of stealth and espionage, using their skills to gather information and move unseen. Basically, spies, infiltrators, and scouts. And finally, there are the Silver Fangs.
Ooh.
And the Silver Fangs serve Gaia through inspiration, leadership, and nobility as the self-styled aristocracy amongst the Garou. Their patron spirit is the Falcon. The Silver Fangs are essentially noble leaders and warriors dedicated to upholding the honor and traditions of the Garou. So aside from the main playable tribes, there are the wayward tribes. So these are 3 tribes that basically you cannot play as a player yet. There might be an expansion where you can, but that's because they've fallen to the Wyrm.
Mm.
So the first one are the Black Spiral Dancers, who despise Gaia. They seek to defile what remains of her and bring about the collapse of the world in the hopes of hastening whatever comes next in the cycle of destruction. Their patron spirit is the Bat. Now, the interesting thing about the Black Spiral Dancers is they used to be the White Marauders or the White Howlers.
Mm.
And basically, kind of like the Red Talons, they were like a group that was noble, aggressive, like, we're going to take the fight to Gaia. Or, we're going to kill Gaia.
We're going to kill Gaia. Wait, what?
Tim, are you sure that's what it says? No, they're going to take the fight to the Wyrm. So they basically found a way to, like, go into the Umbra and to find essentially where they thought, like, the heart of the Wyrm was. And so they were going, like, thinking that it was a thing that they could go tear apart instead of like an aspect of the cycle of life.
Yeah.
And they basically found themselves in an unending, twisting labyrinth that was torturing them and breaking their will. And everywhere around the labyrinth were black spirals.
Gotcha.
And they all went crazy. And basically the spirit of the Bat essentially was like, hey, you guys want a way out? This is cool. Well, hey, guess what? We all hate Gaia now. And they're like, yeah. They all came out. And now they're essentially one of the big, antagonist forces. There's also the cult of Fenris, which turns service into Gaia into fanatical zealotry. They see in other werewolves an allegiance to innumerable enemies. The patron saint of the tribe from which the cult emerged was Wolf. So there's kind of this, in previous editions, there was the Get of Fenris, which was like basically one of the tribes. And essentially the cult of Fenris kind of sprung from that, corrupting, like being
extremists.
Yeah. And unfortunately, now it's what's left. So, and last one are stargazers, who saw the fracture of the Garou nation before it happened and left to seek other ways to thwart the looming apocalypse. Their patron spirit was once the ever-changing chimera, but who can say if that's still true? Mm-hmm. So stargazers basically are a group of werewolves that believe there might be another way to fix the problem, but like they're also not necessarily going to tell anybody how to do that, and no one knows what they're doing.
Right.
So they're somewhere between like Malkavians, like doing weird crud that might matter and might not, and like just hidden people, like, hidden lore keepers who know the secrets of what's happening. So yeah, so when you become a werewolf, your first change matters a lot. So basically, depending upon your first change, it affects your auspice. So this is kind of classic. This was also in Forsaken. So the Garou revere a set of traditional cultural roles imparted by Luna, sister to Gaia. A werewolf's auspice is their moon sign, almost always in alignment with the lunar phase at the time of their first change. One's auspice implies a role among Garou society, an expectation of temperament, and a suggested set of responsibilities. The Garou venerate high degrees of competency in the craft of their auspices. So basically, you have the Ragabash, which is a new moon, which is a role of trickster, scout, and question. The role of Ragabash is to question authority, challenge unexamined tradition, and even mock that which is worthy of derision, a highly subjective subject. The Theurge, which is the crescent moon, which is a mystic, shaman, or spirit walker, which is the role of the Theurge is that of the mystic, to develop an experience in matters of the Umbra and relationships with the spirits. So they're going to be basically the one doing most of the spiritual talking.
Right.
Philodox, which is half moon. The role of the Philodox is to preserve and interpret the ways and customs of werewolves, to arbitrate and render judgment based upon the largely oral history of the Garou. The Galliard, gibbous moon, which is bard, storyteller, and inspirer. The role of the Galliard is to promote the legends of the werewolves, to sing the songs of bygone comrades and tonight's champions of the Garou, thus inspiring the legends to come. And finally, the rune, the full moon. So the role of the rune is that of the warrior, to take the challenge to the enemy and meet them head on, or otherwise to deliver until that enemy their deserved fate. So other than that, we mentioned too that the werewolves have Garou have basically 5 different forms. So they have hominid, which is human. It's human. You get it?
No, I need to go into greater detail about that.
Well, 10,000 years ago. They have the glabro, which are basically like it's like the wolfman.
Yeah.
It's that kind of like the near human, but you're like bigger, stronger, hairier.
Yeah.
This is really the form in which a lot of work gets done because it doesn't require them to like keep testing willpower. You have the other side, you have the lupus, which is the wolf, and you have the hispo, which is basically like a dire wolf. The dire wolf form, likewise, is like what they're probably going to use a lot of times to travel the woods and to fight stuff like that, because like the wolf is to blend in. And then, of course, you have the peak werewolfy wolf, which is the Krynos, which is their war form. So that was one of the things that we had to get used to, is that in Werewolf the Forsaken, that was called Garou.
Yeah. And
Krynos is actually the war form, where Garou is just what a werewolf has caused. Same thing, though, like greatly increases strength, speed, combat abilities, claws. This is like your beast form. The requirement, which is a little bit stricter than the previous version, is you either have to kill something or spend willpower.
To become it or go?
To be in it.
Okay.
So, like, it will start chewing through willpower pretty quickly.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that's something they address later on. There was, like, the suggestion that you homebrew, like, as long as it's attacking or being attacked, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But, like, the point is that this is not like, oh, I turn into my sexy wolf form. This is war.
Shit's gonna die.
Yeah, like, I am filled with Gaia's rage. I am lamenting her loss, and I have decided that the only way I can feel better is to see you turn inside out.
It's like, the only way for me to feel better is to make you feel worse.
Pretty much. So yeah, rage obviously is basically the guiding force behind it's the primal anger, the fury within the Garou. It's obviously it feeds a lot of their controls, but like also like you have a rage rating, which determines how many rage points you get. Rage can be spent to do some pretty crazy things, like just get extra actions in combat, enhance physical abilities, recover from injuries, but it can also lead you to go into a frenzy.
Yeah.
So,
which can be fun.
Yeah. They also have the Gnosis, which represents a Garou's spiritual energy and their connection to the Umbra. So basically, that's a lot where you're going to have like your Gnosis rating, which is like how in tune with the spirit world you are. That's where you activate gifts and perform rituals and things like that. Then you have like your Renown, which represents your reputation and your standing within the Garou nation, which can be divided into glory, honor, and wisdom, which basically offers the ability to basically use Renown and make advancements in your rank and stuff like that. Yeah, this is an interesting game, right? Like, this is a game where, like I said, on the flip side of Vampire, you're once again dealing with a person who's coming to terms with the fact that there's a monster inside. But this monster is not
malicious.
It's heavily malicious, actually.
You think so?
It wants to burn.
Well, I agree, but like towards an end.
Yeah, it's not self-destructive.
Right.
Really. Whereas the beast is kind of like feed me, or like, you know, with Garou, like, it's just more of like, you now are an atom bomb.
Yeah.
You're walking around with something very powerful inside of you. And as long as you try to keep it safe nearby other people, you're going to hurt them. And that's this whole concept of like, the Garou are part of two different worlds that basically belong to neither.
Yeah. Like
you can't really hang out with your family anymore. Like, you have to kind of go find fellow Garou, and you have to go start. You also have the whole problem with, I'm going to have to find the words for this, but basically, if you spend too much time away from the spirit world and the human realm, you settle into this form of despair. They have a specific word for this. But likewise, if you spend too much time into like the werewolf world and you spend too much time like fighting and stuff like that, you can also fall into this it's not like a rage, but you basically enter into this mental state where everything has to be solved with violence.
Mm.
So like you have some ability to be a rational person, but like your answer is violence. It's kind of like
sure, charge violence.
But it's kind of like the vengeance thing, like the John Wick, like there is no talking to him anymore,
Right.
even though he can walk into a building and go talk to people.
Right.
Like you're just not going to get through to him because he is. And both of these are seen as very detrimental.
Yeah.
Although Garou tend to believe that the Berserk one is like not as big of a problem. Or that like they could stop if they really wanted to. But one of the problems with that, the cult of Fenris or the get of Fenris, is basically they're all stuck in that.
Yeah.
Like, so they're all convinced that if you're not immediately fighting Gaia the way they want you to, you're part of the problem and you need to die. So, yeah. So yeah, that's Werewolf the Apocolypse. At least that's our beginning exploration of it. I mean, this felt a little not as on point as I'd like it to be.
I think it was pretty on point.
Maybe my inner Garou just wanted to lash out over the course of these. So to be honest, folks, the more I was researching this, the more I was just like, yeah, that makes sense. We should do like.
So if I check in your search history, am I going to start seeing some names of CEOs?
It's just like that. I think this, as much as we said Max was the werewolf and like this stuff, spiritually, this connects in a way that Vampire doesn't.
Yeah.
In a way that I was like, no, I understand this. Maybe me and a bunch of my friends should go out and do some stuff that, like it like if it presents a world in which the protagonists can't help but surrender to the fury of how impotent they are in the great scheme of things, right?
Yeah. And
so as such, the only thing that they can do is give in to the anger and go out there and fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe we all need to see that. And maybe the reason, so to go all the way back, to bring it all the way back in this convoluted maze of crud I have put out in front of you guys, I go back to my first point where I think everybody should play this game.
I agree.
Because I think this is basically the perfect example of that. No matter if we all feel this way, things only get done if we work together. If you're stuck in infighting and you're stuck in chewing down the people next to you over picky things because you're like, no, like that's blah, 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 instead of the big bad people out there hurting everybody, you're part of the problem. Get in line, pick up the pitchfork and go,
right?
So
I think we're on a list now.
Not enough people listen to this.
Yeah.
So if you want to play a game exploring those feelings, like some people do every morning, this is a good one. Why don't you pick it up, get some cathartic, go find that polluter, that Captain Planet villain wannabe, go tear out somebody's throat or go stalking through the spirits and, yeah, I don't know where to end this.
I mean, that seems like a good place.
It's probably a good one. All right, guys, we'll see you back with more rational, calm-centered brains.
Sure.